Well, the music has stopped and most of the tents have probably still been left in the field, but the fallout from this year's Glastonbury lingers on. But what was it like on the ground? And where does the festival's broadcast to the BBC go from here? Finn, you were at the festival for the very first time this year. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I don't know if I'll be going back. The first thing is my most prosaic and banal observation is that it is so extraordinarily loud. It's just noise.
You shocked me, Finn.
Noise everywhere. But it's not just the music, it's the visual noise that I found so overwhelming. Just like massive signs everything is in block capital letters. There's no lowercase anywhere.
Sensory onslaught.
Sensory onslaught, such that a new addition to the festival, I was asked a few people who have kind of seasoned Glastonbury goers. They've in recent years started adding these sensory tents for people who are getting overwhelmed by this sort of stuff.
Did you go in?
I did go. I went into one beside Kneecap, and boy, did I need it.
What was in the tent beside Kneecap?
It's just kind of like they're not particularly high grade. It's just kind of enclosed, white,
and noiseless, presumably.
Noiseless, quieter, but nowhere is quiet, right?
Yeah.
Everything is so loud, and I think like what's interesting is that they've always been the kind of healing fields and the kind of hippie, dippy, holistic kind of calming stuff. But this kind of new, like, hyper-medicalized version of it is this, like, new addition.
I wonder if it's been designed to look good on television. I remember going to Beyonce, the tour last year, the Beyonce tour, and I just came away thinking that gig was designed for a mobile phone. It just looked great. And so maybe, because certainly the Charlie XCX set and the Prodigy set, it just looked like a rave.
Yeah.
And there were, a huge amount of strobes on the camera, and I suppose it's like they know that half the appeal of it is watching it from home and not actually having to go. So maybe this like sensory amped up version is part of that.
You need to dial everything up into Technicolor so it translates onto the screen.
But hang on, Kate, how many times have you been to Glastonbury?
Only twice.
Only twice, but you are a big music writer. So this
I just feel I couldn't do it now. I used to be unable to walk for 3 or 4 days afterwards.
When was the last time you went?
2011.
Wow, okay.
Yeah,
so
I haven't been for that long.
I thought you were some sort of like veteran, like in the trenches every year.
I have to. I kind of don't sleep when I'm there, and as I've got older, I can't really exist on no sleep. So I went when I last went. I accepted there would be no sleep for 48 hours, and now that's just not possible without mental illness.
Speaking of the festival being able to translate onto the screen. The strangest thing that I saw or heard about there was the people who were there who watched the BBC coverage while on site. So for example, there are these kind of hospitality tents that are, the higher up the hill you get, the kind of more elite of an attendee you are and the more expensive your ticket is. And I heard that on the Saturday night, most of the people staying right up at this farm at the very top that kind of presides over the entire site, like looks down on them on the high. Most people are sitting there with blankets and glasses of red wine watching the BBC coverage when it's just down there. It's not far. You can go. You go yourself.
Well, that leads me on. The big phenomenon of Glastonbury is that whatever happens at Glastonbury, whatever the news line is, mostly doesn't hit the people who are at the festival, right? So how much were you aware of what was going on with Bob Vylan? Nothing, presumably, until you had to write about it.
I hadn't Scoobies until Will texted me.
Had you heard of Bob Vylan?
No.
Heard of Bob Vylan.
Was anyone out Bob Vylan?
Kate, you know about music. Did you know Bob Vylan?
Well, my favourite thing about Bob Vylan is, you know what their names are?
Bobby.
Pascal.
Bob Vylan and Bob Vylan.
No, his real name is Pascal. He's double Pascal Robinson Foster.
He's revealed his real name.
He's the
because it was about being under a surveillance nation. Yeah. They didn't want their names out, and so it was like on the drums we have Bobby, and on vocals we have Bobby.
I.E. and
together they're Bob Vylan.
They are Bob Vylan.
Together
clearly
they're Bob Vylan.
It just can't be a real name, can it?
It rings a bell, but
vaguely.
I wonder what
that illusion is. Yeah.
So you had no idea whatsoever until Will texted you. This is very classic Glastonbury.
Yeah, I had no idea. No one I was hanging out with had any idea. They were on before Kneecap, and I did go and see Kneecap because I thought that was going to be.
You have to, right?
That was going to be the story, and in many ways, it kind of still is the story. But they must have felt like really outperformed by these previously completely irrelevant.
They had like 70,000 streams on Spotify just after I looked at it, just after that set. And I mean, I now sound like thousands of years older than I actually am, but I'd obviously never heard of them.
No.
But I don't think anyone has ever really heard of them.
No. But it's made their career now, like the biggest punk band in the UK now, or in the world right now.
I think there's something interesting about that informational relationship between the people who are there and the people who are outside, that the politics doesn't feel as conspicuous when you're there. There's a lot of it, and it's kind of like the ambient, but it's not what people are talking about. You know, they wave the flag and then they immediately forget they're holding it, and whereas looking at the coverage on the way back, feeling very car sick in the back roads of Somerset as I tried to make my way back to London, you would have been forgiven to think that every single person at the festival was at Bob Vylan, and everyone was at Kneecap, and everyone held a kind of summit afterwards to discuss.
To condemn.
What does that tell us about how these things get inflated and become the story? I mean, they're under criminal investigation now. And as you say, at the festival, it wasn't really obvious to anybody what had happened. I mean, what's that saying about the way that we focus on maybe on punk bands when there's other things going on in the world that we should be focusing on?
I suppose if you're not there and you're not enjoying the sensory tanks and you're not enjoying the visual noise and, you know, all of the kind of weird and strange stuff, but you want to say something about it and you want to chip in and you want to comment somehow, the politics is the easiest thing to extract. And I think the politics is important, and I think the politics is kind of ephemeral, and each year the cause changes, and, you know, there weren't any EU flags this year, but I remember in 2016 that was
the flag.
It was the great affront.
A lot of the conversations I had with Finn, as the editor of the piece she's written for this week's magazine about Glastonbury, were about her quest to find food that wasn't a cheese toastie. Like, it did seem like that was a big concern for you. You did eventually find like a side salad, maybe a gherkin or something.
Did you say you ate 5 cheese toasties?
Yeah. So there was a single cheese toastie stand that never had a queue, and that probably should have been
only customer.
That should probably be the first warning sign.
Was it nice? I never even asked you if it was nice.
Cheese and onion, classic. It was a kind of creature of convenience situation, and once you've been separated from your friends in the middle of the Charlie XCX rave and the kind of Strobel assault, actually not queuing and sitting on the ground and having a little cheese toastie.
No, you must have a cheese toastie. I'm not condemning the cheese toastie.
I don't feel very well now. So.
Yeah, of course. More broccoli this week, some courgettes.
So from where I was sitting on Saturday night, having failed to get the latest episode of And Just Like That to work on Now TV, I was having to watch Glastonbury. And,
that's your job, Kate. You have to watch Glastonbury.
And so I was, you know, taking in the Charlie XCX set, and I wondered what you made of that, because you were right in the middle of it. It looked like a rave. It looked like a huge mass movement.
Yes, yeah, and it felt like that too. You know, that's a huge. She was on this stage called The Other Stage, and that's like just a huge site and a huge area, and it's kind of expansive, but it was just very busy, obviously. It was, and I repeat myself, very loud. And it was the youngest collection of people I'd seen, I think. So it was a little bit more energetic than, say, Rod Stewart, or dare I criticize the audience of Neil Young. And so it was great, but again, it felt like it was made to translate for TV, and was less about the music in the moment. And that's probably something that says something deeper about Charlie XCX herself as a performer.
Yeah.
You know, she can't sing. She uses auto-tune. It's all very, very artificial. That's kind of the point.
Everything that's crap about it is deliberately crap.
Right, exactly.
And it's sort of that just eats itself for me. And I ended up thinking, she has no soul.
Oh gosh, like,
what is this woman? She has no soul. Especially that bit towards the end where she said something like, I'm known to have a heart of stone, but this has been effing emotional for me. And I just thought, wow, this is all of Charlie in a nutshell. It's quite a strange experience.
Hang on, does that mean you liked it or didn't like it?
No, I just think there's no soul. But I do find I find her very interesting, but she's difficult to deal with as well. I have interviewed her a couple of times.
What was she like?
Well, the first time it was a long time ago, and she was still in her unknown phase, and it was really interesting because she was kind of crowdsourcing information for her albums. So she would get a load of 16-year-olds together in a room, and she would say, what do you think of this record? And someone would put their hand up and go like, I don't like it, it shouldn't be the single. And it was really
focus grouping.
It was so funny because you'd watch her and she'd just go, Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks. And you knew that she was thinking, "Rah!" But yeah, she's an interesting concept. And then the last time I interviewed her last year, I think it took 7 attempts to actually pin her down, and we ended up doing on like just a phone in the back of a car, and her face would like flicker in and out, and it was for a cover story. And I was like, you really don't need the press at all. Like she's very kind of above everything.
I think there's something kind of irredeemably uncool about her. It's the wanting it too much. It's the not being able to play a guitar. Or maybe she can play a guitar, but not doing that.
Yeah.
So it's very un-Glastonbury, and it's reflected in the crowd as well. You know, I think if I was to like put on my like cool identifying goggles, which I don't have on permanently, I'd say like the coolest, most interesting people were at Chic on the playing the Pyramid stage.
Really? Yeah.
The least cool were at Pulp.
Yeah.
And Charlie XCX
That's
is somewhere in
interesting.
the middle.
What about Snow Patrol, which you enjoyed on Sunday evening?
Okay, sorry.
The least cool the big highlight other than the cheese sandwiches for Finn was it Snow Patrol? Am I allowed to say that?
Well, you've said it now. I was so deliriously excited to go and see Snow Patrol, and no one would come with me. So what I did was I filed an article for Will, had a cheese toastie, bought a big glass of white wine, and went to Snow Patrol on my own.
Massive.
And it was
huge.
It was transcendental.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
What was their political statement? Sort of bring back Nick Clegg or something like that.
They also want the IDF to be destroyed, actually.
It did get picked up. Like,
They're insistent.
Well, speaking of which, what was Kneecap's political statement? Because they got completely eclipsed, didn't they?
Yeah.
They're out now. We don't care about Kneecap
I think
anymore.
the thing is that so Kneecap just did what Kneecap always do, with the Palestine flags, and he's wearing the tricolor balaclava. The problem for Kneecap now is we've kind of seen it. We kind of know what you do now.
Yeah.
And and I think the problem with like outrage and shock bands is that they have to keep going one step further if they're going to keep generating the headlines. So Kneecap, I think, are probably very worried right now, if they were to be cynical about this, and I believe that they probably are, that they can be eclipsed like that and they never see it coming. And now they're not the main characters anymore.
Yeah.
Because they didn't say the even more extreme thing.
Do you still feel that they're not very bright?
Did I say I felt that? I think their métier is not sophisticated political communication. That's okay. I think they are. I think they're really energetic. The rapping in Irish is really impressive.
You said you liked it.
I had a good time.
You did say you liked it.
I had a good time. I was like,
I
was sitting in a hedge basically at the back, being like, I'll be comfortable here, and I won't get pulled into the melee. And I found myself like, okay, I can really see why people want to be here.
Yeah.
It's fun, but trying to say it's fun while extricating the politics of it all. But again, the politics of it all, again, it's ambient. It's not actually as extreme, or extreme is the wrong word. It's not as kind of direct.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. So they've been trumped really in the directness now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it was so funny seeing that tweet that Bob Vylan did just before the set, where they're like, it seems like the BBC trust us to play Glastonbury now. And the pair of them are just grinning away. What do we make of the fact that it's sort of spiralled into the stratosphere with the BBC thing, and that there are...
Nick has strong views on this.
Yeah.
Strong views on the BBC?
Yeah.
I've got quite milquetoast views on the BBC,
right.
unfortunately. But,
That's good.
This is the controversy, isn't it? That he didn't pull the live feed. He was on site, Tim Davie. Presumably he was in the silent disco or something like that. And
he was
didn't
at
realise
Snow
it was
Patrol.
happening. He was at Snow Patrol.
yeah, he was distracted.
Tim Davie was with Finn having a glass of white wine. He goes, Snow Patrol pretty good, aren't they? I haven't lost it at all. It's very overblown, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what's happened to us, like just as a country, that people can't just say like very irritating things depending on your point of view, whether it's irritating or not. I'm not sure it's that irritating. I think the conflation with the IDF with like the entire population of Israel and every Jew in the world is like completely untrue.
They were pretty specific, weren't they?
Yeah. I don't really think they're worried about it. If they wanted to go after Mr. Bob Vylan,
Pascal.
yeah, if they wanted to go after Pascal, I'm sure they could. The IDF.
What is it that Nandy's said today?
I think
Lisa,
she
has
questions
been-
to answer or something.
BBC has questions
to answer.
The shame has been
What's the
invoked.
question though?
I just think as a culture, like compared to say the 70s, it just feels a lot more.
There's kind of
You write about this quite well, Finn, as well in your piece, really well.
But it's the same as the 70s, isn't it? I mean, it's like people getting cross and then people doing it to make them cross. I mean, I wrote down something that Pascal had said about his sort of strategy here. But if I can say a thing and you'll get upset, then that feels like a small victory. Like it's kind of, we're talking about punk. I mean, like
Yeah.
So,
what is punk but other than like vague oppositional, like making a noise and you hopefully cry about it. Like they've succeeded.
Here's the problem, right? Which is kind of like cosmic for both Glastonbury and the BBC, which is that their purposes are kind of in contradiction of each other. Glastonbury, the music festival, punk, you know, a punk sensibility. Let Kneecap play, let Bob Vylan play. The BBC has a charter. It has standards. It has impartiality standards. Those two things are not always going to commune well. So the BBC being the official broadcaster of something like Glastonbury, it feels like completely inevitable that these clashes will happen, and they're kind of like very unhappy bedfellows.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised this doesn't explode more frequently.
The BBC's scared, I think. I was speaking to like quite a senior person in the BBC a couple of weeks ago, just about some of the things they've been trying to get through the BBC at the moment, and just said they're terrified of everything. I mean, even the smallest thing that you wouldn't think of can go up the chain in the BBC all the way to some very official desk in there and sort of explode on the desk. And then all the pieces fall back down to you trying to make something.
And that's what you can see today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something that was relatively just, it was a bit of a tremor at the beginning. It's just going out of control to the point where it's like Tim Davies has to consider his position and everything like that. Which is,
really?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's-
yes, exactly. But really?
But as Finn pointed out in a piece about Kneecap a few weeks ago, that Kneecap weren't particularly punk in apologising originally a few weeks back. And from what I know, Bob Vylan have doubled down on what they did. So maybe they've learned from the example of Kneecap, and they know that if you are actually going to be a punk band in an era that doesn't really have punk bands anymore, you have to be quite tough. In that way. But it's a fantastic career move as well, and also getting your visa taken off by Trump is also a fantastic.
Well, it's
career
like the
move.
best thing that can happen to a protester is to get arrested.
Yeah.
Right.
Would you rather have a Grammy or have your visa suspended by Donald Trump?
Is that a?
I would rather have my visa suspended by Donald Trump.
if you're them, we want a Brit Award. I think you'd start.
I'd take the Grammy. Actually,
would you take the Grammy?
Yeah, I would.
I have to ask you if you saw Rod Stewart. Because he's got no flack, really, from having endorsed Nigel Farage the
That's
day
nothing
before.
now.
Nothing.
Yeah, he's completely,
Was he
superseded.
going for the Bob Vylan effect?
Well,
On the other
I don't
side
think he
of
said
things?
anything on stage, but yeah, it was. And also, he moaned about how much it was costing him to play Glastonbury, which is so.
Is he making a loss?
Yeah, he's one of the most famously tight men in rock. Like he's an old sort of 80s Tory. And,
Small state,
Yeah, and it was fine that he was Tory in the 80s because it was just an uncool thing that uncool rock stars did. But to be endorsing Farage is a bit different. But yeah, he complained that it cost him £300,000 because he had to ship over his band from America. So he said that before he actually played. And so I took about putting a damper on it.
Didn't Madonna pull out last year because the fee wasn't high enough? Because
Well, how much do they get paid?
I don't know, but like I think a lot of these American acts come over thinking it's like Coachella.
Yeah.
And realising it's cheese toasties and wellies in a field, and they think the money is going to be the same and it's going to have the glitz and glamour, and it just doesn't. So they don't necessarily translate super well to a British crowd.
Yeah.
The person who I thought handled it amazingly was Olivia Rodrigo, who headlined on the Sunday night. It's a 22-year-old, beautiful pop star who's just got like a great roster of songs, but she's American, and a lot of her songs are about being American. And you go, oh God, this isn't going to work. And she brought out The Cure. She sang Friday I'm in Love. She wore these kind of Union Jack pants as all a nod to the entire occasion, and just seemed to really get it in a way that American acts historically haven't, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
But then again, like I'm like, Olivia Rodrigo, she's a star. Have you noticed? Like, it's the most obvious thing to say about her. Like, she just
I
gets
remember
it.
originally you said you were just going to go down for one night to watch her.
I know.
And then you decided to do all three.
Yeah, exactly. I saw all the headliners, and I thought they were, with the exception of Olivia Rodrigo, not the most interesting stuff that was going on.
So you watched Neil Young?
A bit. But
What
then
did you make of it?
A bit, but then I had to get swallowed into the crowd at Charlie XCX.
Oh,
so,
yeah, of course, yeah.
yeah, he's great. I think it's quite nice to have big guitar music on that Saturday night.
Yeah.
Right? When you have like lots of kind of pop and like non-traditional Glastonbury music, I think as lame and staid and stuck as Glastonbury might look by having Neil Young and Rod Stewart, you have to give something to the oldies,
Yeah.
the professional Glastonbury goers.